welcome to the Mindset Michele TV show. We're so super excited for you to be joining us for another amazing, excellent episode. Well, today we have yet another incredible guest joining us to share their insider information into how they have created their successful mindset. So today we're going to be speaking with the lovely Rema Lolas. Hello, Rema.
Hey there, how are you?
It's lovely to see you and to have you come onto the show today. For those of you that aren't aware, Rema is this incredible mindset matrix coaching coach. After 20 plus years in the tech industry, working with organizations like Citrix in sales and channels and enablement and training, she had a bit of a moment in her life, a bit of a burnout. And after that, she's, like many people, refocused and now studied NLP and coaching and become the founder and head coach at Mind Matrix Coaching. But more detailed and for more of the flavour of how you came to, not everybody has a bit of a burnout and decides to become a coach, but Rema, I'm fascinated in how did you get into technology, and then how did you kind of, through your life experiences, decide, oh, okay, I think I'll go off and do coaching now?
Great. Michele, firstly, thanks for having me here today. It's great to be here. How did I get into technology is the first question. I guess I always had an interest through school about technology and computers. And so I landed myself in a computer science degree. I think I was one of 5 females in a class of 300 when I did computer science, and kind of continued down that path, right? And I guess when I finished university, it was about getting a job in tech, but landed myself in a sales job and worked my way through the ranks from sales support to sales leadership, amongst a number of different roles I did in the tech industry for a couple of decades. And I guess, how did I get here today? My roles over the 2 decades spanned from individual contributor and then quickly into management and leadership, both here in Australia and abroad in the United States, working for various different tech companies, and continually progressing into more senior roles. And over time, I reached a point towards the end of those 2 decades where I had hit a serious bout of burnout, which had me take a career break. I was doing a lot of amazing things, leading global teams, leading people in lots of different geographies, and the burnout was real. It stopped me from being able to think straight, from being able to get my work done effectively, from feeling fulfilled in the career that I had loved for such a long amount of time, really. And so, I took my first career break at that point. And then that led me to come home to Australia. Actually, I was in the US at the time, came home, went back into another tech role for another large tech organization. A couple of jobs later, found myself in that same burnout again. And I hadn't quite tackled or understood what was getting me to that point. And I guess over my career, I've been not just a leader of people, which I very much love, but also have enjoyed mentoring men and women rising through the industry, have enjoyed being part of tech groups, like women in tech groups specifically, and actually building some of those and founding some of those in the various companies I worked for, and getting engaged in lots of different networks in the industry as well. But there was always something missing. It felt really great to show up at events and feel like, wow, I'm not the only person who's experiencing a burnout or potentially lack of confidence in certain areas of my life, or some of the other challenges I'd experienced. I'm not alone here. There's a whole room full of women who are experiencing the same thing. And the warm and fuzzies would kind of show up, but then they dissipate, and almost a hollowness, it almost felt like empty networking, and with no disrespect to any of the organizers of the events, but it was great to raise awareness to the challenges, but no one was helping people work through those challenges. So being a leader and a mentor, I've always enjoyed helping people grow, and decided to study to be a coach. And that's when I first realized that wow, I have a lot of work to do myself. And so my journey started and went down that path and eventually built Mind Matrix.
Wow, what a journey. And thank you, Rema, for sharing so eloquently. And so, it's I kind of ask people to give a little bit of background about themselves, but you're actually covering quite a long period of your life. And so I really heard how, working in IT and being a leader in that space was something that you were really passionate and excited about for a long period of time, both here in the US, and those opportunities, working your way up through the different roles and becoming a leader and also becoming a mentor to many women, especially and younger people coming up. And I really love how you didn't quite get it the first time that you had the burnout. And it took a little bit of time to then kind of recognize what was happening. And then when you recognized it, something that I think is a really important aspect for people to have heard is that you pulled elements of what you were already doing in your current role, in the IT role. You're already mentoring and supporting people and coaching them in different ways. So you saw those skills that you already had been building and you had from the career that you were currently in, and then went off and studied and did more work in the areas that you wanted to build your new career in. So really fabulous way that you've explained it there, so people can really see if they're thinking themselves about making that transition, how to go about doing that. It also leads me with somebody that is what I would think of as a high flyer and a high achiever from early on, and from being one of the 5 in 300 women. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of determination to stay in many of those fields. But it means that you can also have different versions of what success means at different times. So I'm interested, with everything that you've been through in your wonderful business that you're building and growing now, what does success now mean to you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think you nailed it by saying that success means different things at different points in our lives. So success to me today, and then maybe I'll give you a little bit of what it used to mean to me. Today, success is very much about feeling fulfilled, being content each day, that I'm doing something that I love, that I'm really following my purpose and following my dreams for what I want my life to be. But success didn't mean that for a very long time. Success when I was younger was, having great grades at school and being able to get into university. And once I was at university, it was about getting top grades at university and being able to get a job in technology. And when I left university, actually, it was an interesting time given Y2K and people trying to find jobs and needing experience, but companies not willing to necessarily give you the experience programming. So I landed in sales. And success in sales is very much about meeting a number and checking a box. And it just becomes this, quarterly cycle of success that you run through, and then you kind of go back to zero and you keep succeeding. And success felt like a checkbox and a commission check and achieving things that were, I guess, outside of me that proved my worth, made me successful, I guess. And I think that's also true. And I know it's true for a lot of the people I work with and for a lot of my friends and family that I speak to, that success is often defined by others. You're successful when you grow up and you go to university and you get a degree and then you get a full-time job and you get married and you have children. And this is what we're made to believe a successful life looks like. And so for a number of years, I was kind of following what I believed I needed to do or what I should do to be successful. Unfortunately, that led me to burnout because I was working towards somebody else's plan or someone else's definition of success, and not really working on my own definition of success and following that plan and having the confidence in all of the different elements to be able to do that effectively. So yeah, success has morphed a lot over the years. And it turns out that what I thought was success, getting to achieve certain titles or certain compensation salary packages. And I had ages that I wanted to achieve these things by, and being a high achiever, I kind of kept driving and striving for that. And that's ultimately what led to my burnout. It was the people pleasing and striving for success that wasn't self-defined.
And you have so beautifully brought in so many different ideas and around success and what it can mean, and also recognizing the different success at different ages. And I agree. I think that when people are younger, there's so much of that checkboxing and success being defined externally. And then it's one of those sad but true things that with the wisdom and with aging and unfortunately with burnout and other significant life events, people start to realize that success actually is from the inside, and it comes more from those feelings being fulfilled that you so beautifully shared about how now and today what success means to you. There's obviously been an incredible journey in transitioning from outward to inward, and from working in high-powered, stressful checkbox IT situations all the way through to the softer and gentler in many ways world of coaching. With your journey, and I'm fascinated by it, what sort of suggestions or tips do you have for people to start to, like, they might have started to see a little bit of what you're talking about in terms of, I'm not happy with this, and when I am looking at what I'm happy, it's because I'm doing something that I feel good about inside of me and not what somebody else has defined. What suggestions and tips do you have for people who may be starting out or part of the way on that journey?
Yeah, so many things. But given that we don't have a lot of time, I guess the top tips for me, success is an inside job, right? So for someone to be successful, they need to define what that success is. So the first tip is very much get clear on what it is that you want. And you'd be surprised. You think it's a really simple question, but so many people are not in touch with what they want. They're so focused on what they think they want, as defined as success externally, or what they're, what's needed in their families, or, different dynamics in their life. But people getting clear on what they want is the first step, in my opinion, to having success for themselves. I'd love to share a story. When I first came back from the US, I was speaking to a recruiter, and he was doing his job. And, I was obviously trying to find the next role for me, but having come from a global position, it was challenging to find the same types of opportunities here in Australia. And I by that time had done quite a few things. I'd worked in sales and sales leadership. I'd worked in global programs. I'd worked across channels and enablement and marketing. So I had quite a mix in my kit bag, if you will, or skill set. And this recruiter said to me, well, you don't really fit neatly in a box. And he was success for him was checking me into some set of boxes that meant I fit into a role for one of his clients. And it was at that point that I kind of sat back and went, no, I don't fit in a box, and I don't want to fit in a box. And yet I'd been striving for a really long time to fit in the boxes that made me successful based on that external definition of success, if you will. So it was really then that I started to recognize that I need to be marching to my own band and my own tune rather than to that of somebody else's. I don't want to fit neatly in a box. And that's when I really started to explore what it is that I wanted. And, I made a few false starts, thinking that I wanted one thing. And so when you get clear on what you want, then you can make a plan to go after it. Then you can set boundaries that keep you on track to get what you want and not what somebody else wants, that start to protect you from things like burnout and the lack of fulfillment that show up. So that would be my first tip. Don't try to fit. Really work out what it is that you want and follow that.
I think that is such an important starting place. We talk a lot about awareness in the social groups that I've been involved with for many years now. It's about that self-awareness and understanding what it is, even to the point of, what is it that makes you happy, and what is it, we can all pretty much talk about what makes us unhappy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good place to start. If you don't know what makes you happy, start with what makes you unhappy and flip it, right? Work out to start to work out what you want and get to your purpose and your values and things like that.
Exactly. And some of the people I studied early on, like D Martini, and it was as simple as look at what you have in your house. Do you have lots of books? Do you have lots of videos? Oh, actually, I haven't got videos anymore. But do you have lots of streaming services? It was taking that beginning steps of even just looking at, well, what do you spend doing in your day or your weeks or your years? Do you travel a lot? Do you this? Do you that? So I really love this, getting the clarity about what makes you happy. And you described it so beautifully earlier when you were talking about what you really enjoyed in the IT space was that mentoring and coaching and supporting people on their journeys. So if people that are watching want to look at getting that clarity, then I think that's a wonderful place to start looking at what you have in your house, what you fill your time with, what your hobbies, and if you have hobbies, what they are. And even as we were joking, if you start with, well, what you don't like, I don't like this, this, or this, and then that shows you, well, you don't need to investigate or check those out. And I also really like how you described how, because when I'm talking about checking it out, you described it as, you thought that something would make you happy or would be what you would want to do. And then you checked it out and it didn't necessarily connect. And I think that this is one of the things where, as children, we're much more open to this idea that, if I go and start to do something, it doesn't mean that that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, or I'm committed to it and there's no going back. But as adults, we tend to have a bit more fear around checking things out, because if we do, then we can be be externally stimulated by people saying, well, you said you were going to do this. And it can be a little bit harder to kind of backtrack and go, well, I checked it out and it wasn't for me. I decided I didn't want to do that. Yeah. But it's that kind of checking it out, which I think is really, really important as part of building that awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as adults, we lose the fun that we have as children trying new things and experimenting. And one of my favorite quotes, and forget who it's by, but it's there's no failure, there's only feedback, right? So to work out what you want, you need to explore and you need to experiment. And every time you try something, you get a little bit of feedback, and either it works for you or it doesn't work for you. And if it doesn't work for you, then you can redirect and try something different. And eventually, as part of that process, because let's be real, clarity never comes overnight. But if you continue to experiment and work on the things that you do enjoy doing, and that you do value, you work it out. One of the things you said before was really interesting, right? It's the start with what you like to do and like what are the things that you surround yourself by, what are the things in your house, because oftentimes, especially those I work with, are mixed between their lived values and their aspirational values. So we have this belief that, we have to have all of these values that are aspirational, and actually they're not the values that we live by every day. So it's an opportunity for people to really check in on that stuff and get clear about, what's meaningful to them.
I love that point. And yes, the other side of that, of course, is the aspirational values of the image, if you like, that you might place on some of the social media you're a part of. It doesn't necessarily always match the values that you live by. And I know that there's people that love getting up at 5 a.m. because they're really good and they function best at 5 a.m. in the morning. And there's others that I know that survive on 4 or 5 hours sleep because they want to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning, and no amount of showing them and sharing the research around the amount of sleep that you need to have per night to function well will dissuade them from doing a habit in terms of the pattern of their sleeping that may not necessarily work for them because they're not morning people. They're still up till late. They've got family, they've got kids. So it's one of those things. I think that clarity, part of that is a degree of honesty about what is your real values versus what are the values that you might like to have. And similar to what we were talking about before, checking them out and really seeing whether they match or not with whether they're really your values or they're your Facebook values or your Instagram values.
Yeah, or the values you feel you need to have because you've inherited them from someone else or something outside of you. Yeah.
Yeah, I when I'm talking to people on the show from different cultural backgrounds, there's many cultural backgrounds where, they inherited initially from their family. They had to be a doctor or an architect or a lawyer. And so one of their incredible wake-up calls was, well, actually, I've never wanted to be a doctor, an architect or a lawyer or any of those things that I went to university and got degrees in. But I think it can be more subtle than that. It can be a lot of expectations and beliefs that we take on from family and from the environment that we may not as obviously be aware of as some of those career paths that people from certain structured cultural backgrounds may have also come from.
Yeah, totally agree.
And you so wonderfully mentioned as well in there the other elements around once you have that clarity and you have that understanding or awareness, then working on some sort of plan and setting up some boundaries. Did you want to share a little bit more about those tips for people?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably add a tip in between, right? And I think I briefly touched on, or I mentioned the word, but once you know and get clear on what it is that you want, I think it's really important to understand the meaning behind that, to make it really meaningful. Because if we don't have meaning or make meaning, and I'll explain that in a sec, then it's really hard to get motivated to go after what you want. So why is it that you want what you want? What do you get? For me, when I work down kind of the meanings of why I do what I do and why I want to run this business, to be a leadership coach and help people master self-leadership and go after what they want in their life without, self-sacrifice and burnout, it's because ultimately I want to drive that generational change. I want people to learn the lessons I learned 20 years before I did, so that they can actually spend those 20 years having an impact on the world and actually doing the things that are meaningful to them rather than getting in these burnout cycles and kind of measuring success by those check boxes, right? So it's really about keeping on art. So once you're clear on what it is that you want, getting into the why that you want that and getting really in touch, by peeling back the layers of why. Because once you've got that meaning, that's what's going to drive the motivation. And that's what's going to get that's what's going to get you out of bed every morning to go after what it is that you want. So once you really have that meaning, then you can move into the plan, right? So setting really powerful goals and really powerful actions aligned to the meaning. And those can include, goals that are going to help you, smaller goals that are going to help you achieve things in the short term. I'd always say, work with some larger goals and then chunk those down, but make sure that you have those smaller goals aligned to the larger goals so that you can measure things along the way. Sometimes we can have such a long-term goal about what we want that we get lost in the process and then we lose motivation. So when you have a really long-term goal, I would say, break that down into some key milestones and then break each of those milestones into some smaller goals that you can achieve along the way that you can measure and count your success with, right? A lot of people I work with, and I used to do this a lot, is not counting and not celebrating what you have achieved and focusing only on what you haven't yet achieved and what you can't do. So by counting what you have achieved, you're going to have much more success moving towards what it is that you want to achieve for yourself. So I think that's really important.
I agree completely. Celebrating your successes along the way is very, very important. And there's that wonderful expression about success breeds success. So if you celebrate those small steps and those small goals that you keep achieving on your journey, on that journey to a bigger longer term goals, then that kind of breeds those habits and creates those habits for success. I wanted to touch briefly on what you were saying about meaning and purpose, because I think that to me is like the fire and the engine that does get you out of bed in the morning. And you reminded me of many years ago, there was a local small business association, and I remember we were there at 6:30, and it was raining, it was pouring, it was cold and wet and dark. It was the middle of winter. And I remembered looking around the room and thinking about what was it that motivated, and I talked about it with the group, what was it that motivated people and kept them going rather than turning over and going, oh, I'll go back to sleep, to come to this meeting with all of the things and the reasons that would have been very reasonable to not come to the meeting. And without fail, it was the motivation and the meaning behind what they were doing, the difference that everybody was making to their clients, to the world, to humanity, whatever level it was on. It all came back to the meaning and the motivation behind their work. And it wasn't that they were getting out of bed to make more money or this or that, because they could go to a different meeting later in the day or whatever. It was all, without a doubt, everybody was there because they had a bigger meaning that then became like this fire, this motivation in their engine to get them out of bed when it wasn't necessarily sunny and bright and shining.
Yeah.
And and it's also the way that you so beautifully put it. It's that motivation to keep going with those smaller goals, to build up the momentum, to keep achieving some of those bigger goals, and that motivation to also celebrate, like I was doing that day. Oh, everybody here is really committed to what they're doing, because they're doing the activities to show that they're committed. They're not just saying it, they're doing it as well. If people were wanting to get hold of speaking to you and hear some more about your journey in Mind Matrix Consulting, Rema, what's the best way for people to get hold of you?
Yeah, I would love to connect with anyone who some of the messages resonated with and share more of my story and my work. Probably a DM on LinkedIn would be the best way. I'm Rema Lolas on LinkedIn, or they can follow Mind Matrix Coaching and get me there, and we can start a conversation.
Fabulous. And one of my favourite questions to talk to people, especially people that are high achievers and have kind of reached the pinnacle in one area and then shifted careers in some sort, is what advice might you give to your younger self?
Okay. I think there are two bits of advice that come to mind. The first is march to the beat of your own drum. Work out what it is that you want and go after that, because if you don't and you're working towards someone else's plan, that's when burnout and the lack of fulfillment show up. So, just follow your heart, follow what feels right for you, and give yourself permission. I think oftentimes I see men and women suffering with this, but a lot of the women I work with is often look for permission outside of themselves to go after something that they want. But it's about having that self-trust and giving yourself permission to give things a go, because no one else knows what's right for you, as well as you know what's right for you. So give yourself the permission to give things a go and to go after what it is that you want.
What beautiful, beautiful advice. And another quick story on that. I watched this amazing movie over the Easter weekend where there was a point where the daughter was talking to her mother, this adult daughter, and her mum was reminding her that when they had all the US college applications come up, that her daughter had shaved her hair off as a protest about some sort of, women being oppressed, etc. And her mum had pleaded with her and begged her, this was like all the college application interviews, don't screw it up by shaving off all your hair. And of course, she got invited to go to every single college that she had applied for. And it was because it wasn't a gimmick to her. She wasn't doing it to just be noticed. She was doing it because she truly believed about women's rights, etc. And when she'd gone to those interviews, they'd actually felt that and really understood that. And what her mum was reminding her about was marching to the beat of her own drum, staying true to herself. So I think that your wonderful advice about giving permission and the self-trust is very, very poignant and such a wonderful way to end the show today. It's been such a joy to have you on today, Rema.
It's been so nice to be here and be able to share my story. Thank you for having me, Michele.
It's been fabulous. And to everybody watching, I'm so grateful that you tune in to all these different shows to hear these incredible stories of people's journeys and also their insights into tips to creating success in your own life. But for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.